You're probably wondering why I'm wearing these. And the reason is because I was told I don't have the personality to run a YouTube channel. Classical conditioning. It's learning through association or linking two stimuli together to create a new learned response in a person or animal. An example of classical conditioning is the collective response to the announcement of a new Sonic title, which is typically something along the lines of either that or it just gets dunked on with memes, which honestly helps it more than it hurts it. But, and this may be hard to believe, there was actually a period of time when Sonic the Hedgehog was seen as the epitome of cool. A righteous, rebellious, and of course radical action hero that was relatable to teenagers. So where did it all go wrong? How did the blue blur go from being one of gaming's coolest heroes to one of its most insufferable doofuses?
Too easy, no sweat.
In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the fall of Sonic the Hedgehog. Our story begins in 1989 with the release of the Sega Genesis, gaming's first true 16-bit console. In spite of that obvious brag, the Genesis was still being outsold by the NES and Super Mario Bros. 3. Combine that with the fact that Nintendo was also outperforming Sega in arcades, and things were not going Sega's way whatsoever. Sega's luck would only get worse with the announcement of the Super Nintendo, Nintendo's first 16-bit console. This sent Sega into a panic, and they knew they were going to have to do something, and it would have to be done fast. The first step Sega took to save themselves was hiring a new North American division CEO, a guy by the name of Tom Kalinske, former head of a small toy company called Mattel. You may have heard of them. I think they make like action figures or something. Kalinske wanted to focus more on brand awareness, and he also wanted the Genesis to move away from making largely celebrity-themed games, like Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, James Buster Douglas Knockout Boxing, Jimmy White's Whirlwind Snooker, and David Robinson's Supreme Court, a basketball game that features 4 fictional North American teams because it didn't have an NBA license. In hindsight, it is pretty difficult to see why the Genesis was underperforming. I think it was the economy. Anyways, Kalinske's end goal was to create a hit video game with a character that would become synonymous with the Sega brand. Sega tasked Team AM8, a 5-person development team, with the utmost important task of saving their brand. No pressure, guys. Some of the early concepts created for this brand-saving flag bearer included funny animals and funny old men. But it would ultimately be Naoto Oshima's sketch of a hedgehog that would gain some traction in the office. Team AM8 wanted their hedgehog to be cocky, rebellious, edgy, and of course, relatable to teenagers. Somebody who went against what the man had to say and didn't care what anybody thought. That's why he was named Mr. Needlemouse. Mr. Needlemouse's game will be a side-scrolling platformer, similar to Mario, but with a little bit of a twist. See, Team AM8 wanted their hedgehog to be the fastest video game character ever, so each level was designed to keep him moving. But areas where he would have to slow down or stop were introduced to keep the game interesting yet challenging. You don't just want players holding a stick in one direction, right? As for the story, it was kept pretty simple. Dr. Eggman, Mr. Needlemouse's mortal enemy, kidnaps and traps his friends and robots, and it's up to the hedgehog to go save them. Everything seemed to be falling into place for this big brand-saving release, except for one key factor: the character's name. Yeah, Mr. Needlemouse doesn't exactly sound like the fastest video game character ever, right? Sega knew that a name change was in order. They wanted his name to retain his coolness, yet speak more to who he is and the fact that he's really, really fast. That's why he was renamed after the speed sound reaches: Sonic. Thus, Sonic the Hedgehog was officially born. Sonic the Hedgehog became so beloved around the Sega offices that Team AM8 was officially renamed Sonic Team, the name they still go by today in spite of, well, everything. Sega was confident that Sonic would be a slam dunk, and by golly were they right. Sonic the Hedgehog for the Sega Genesis was officially released on June 23rd, 1991, with the game being so popular that people purchased a Genesis just to play it. Eventually, the game that came with the Sega Genesis, Altered Beast, yeah, me neither, was switched out for Sonic the Hedgehog, only further driving sales. Overall, the 1991 Sonic game sold 15 million copies in North America alone. Sonic saved Sega and showed Nintendo that there was genuine competition in the home console market. And 15 million units is nothing to scoff at, right? Like, that's a really impressive number. The 1991 Sonic game is the highest selling Sonic game of all time, which is a problem. The sequel, creatively titled Sonic the Hedgehog 2, didn't even crack the halfway mark of the original game's sales, shifting only 6 million units. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 would be the beginning of a worrying trend that really has yet to cease. So with each subsequent Sonic release, sales continued to plummet. Sonic 2 sold 6 million units, Sonic 3 1.2 million, and Sonic & Knuckles 1.24 million. Now those aren't necessarily poor numbers, but they're nowhere near the original game's success by any means. Sega knew they were going to have to do something to freshen up their Hedgehog, and that something was transition him into the world of 3D. And oh boy, here's where the going gets tough. The worst thing about Sonic's transition into the world of 3D is it's not like there was a gradual dip in quality over time, which would be a little bit more understandable. No, it was just bad from the start. So when did it start, I hear you ask? Well, to answer that question, we're going to have to journey all the way back to 1996 and take a look at the very first Sonic title to utilize 3D graphics, Sonic Blast. Sonic Blast was released for the Sega Game Gear. Yeah, me neither. On December 12th, 1996. It was released concurrently with Sonic 3D Blast, which would make one think that they're similar, but they're completely different games. With Sonic 3D Blast being... well, I don't even know what this is. Oh yeah, fun fact about Sonic 3D Blast. Shaking the cartridge while it's in the Game Gear pulls up a secret level select screen, which makes game testers and players think they've just unlocked this hidden menu or extra level, when in reality that menu was placed there to hide any glitches, crashes, or bugs. Man, right out of the gate and we're already on a hot streak. I love it. Anyways, Sonic Blast was not well received at all. Like most Sonic games, it was praised for the good it brought the franchise, but some people claim it to be the worst Sonic game ever made, which I hate to say isn't even true. The game experiments with pre-rendered graphics similar to Donkey Kong Country, but isn't as visually successful due to the Game Gear's limited power. And trust me when I say that graphics are the least concerning problem in a game just riddled with issues. So much so, in fact, that I'm just gonna list them off. Right, so the Western version of the game features a lazy story which can be summed up by saying Eggman is up to no good and Sonic and Knuckles must stop him, as opposed to the Japanese version of the story, where Eggman accidentally splits the Chaos Emerald trying to blast Sonic and must collect the pieces to power his silver castle. Enemies have hitboxes that far exceed the size of their sprites, making for some interesting combat opportunities. Couple that with the game's dysfunctional hit detection and broken sprites, and each fight becomes a battle for the ages. A limited view of what's ahead of Sonic as he speeds through each level can result in a catastrophic outcome. Collecting 100 rings awards you with a bonus life, but it also resets your ring counter to 0, which means you could lose that life as quickly as you earned it. And finally, losing all of your lives means you'll be sent back to the start menu and required to enter a cheat code if you want to get back to the level you were just on. God, isn't gaming great? And that's only some of what's wrong with Sonic Blast. I didn't even touch on the heads-up display, the repetitive power-ups, and the entire Chaos Emerald fiasco. Regardless, I'm sure it's easy to see why Sonic Blast has earned the title as one of the worst Sonic games ever made by many people. But if you've ever played a Sonic the Hedgehog game before, do any of the issues I just listed off sound familiar to you? These are still problems that plague the franchise to this day, and at the time of recording, Sonic Blast is 24 years old. If this were any other game franchise that failed to address these real basic issues after 2 decades, I doubt it would even be around anymore. But apparently, Sonic the Hedgehog is a different story. It has to be, because things only get worse from here. I don't know how, but they really, really do. Right, so it's time for a bit of a time jump to 1998, which was a significant year for both Sega and Sonic the Hedgehog. 1998 saw Sega release the first fully 3D Sonic the Hedgehog game, Sonic Adventure. And wouldn't you know it, Sega absolutely knocked it out of the park. Reviews of the game praised it for being the fastest 3D platformer to date, setting it apart from the largely collection and exploration-based titles that fill the market. Other reviews will go on to praise the game's beauty, stating that Sonic's speed only further added to the visuals. The game was also praised for being a deep title with tons of replay value due to its multiple campaigns and various minigames. So yeah, by the sounds of it, Sega really did a lot right by Sonic with Sonic Adventure. But the game's not exactly perfect. Some of the critique thrown at the game comes in the form of underwhelming boss battles, cutscenes being too long and confusing, a lack of a visual objective marker, the god-awful camera and perspective-based controls resulting in frequent and unfair deaths, and the atrocious voice acting.
Oh, man. Come on, Sonic! We need to get busy!
Oh, and apparently Sonic stopping in the middle of, going fast was a really big problem too. Like I said earlier, the game wasn't perfect, but it was a pretty solid attempt at transitioning Sonic into the precarious world of 3D gaming. And then they went and soiled it all. Sega released Sonic Adventure DX for the GameCube and Dreamcast in 2003. The DX gave the game the edginess it was previously lacking. Or it was at least an edgy way of saying this was the director's cut. Some incentives to pick up Sonic Adventure DX over the original included improved graphics, all new exclusive content, and more action. You'd be shocked to hear that the game failed to deliver on any of those statements. The improved graphics that the game touted went pretty much unnoticed, save for some strange lighting that would make the character models look weird from time to time. But other than that, DX really didn't look that much different from the original. It did, however, run at 60 frames per second, to its own detriment. See, the fact that DX ran at 60 FPS meant that the frame drops that were already present in the original were only more noticeable in Sonic Adventure DX. On top of that, the game would slow down immensely anytime Sonic had to do his thing. Go fast. Now keep in mind that Sonic Adventure wasn't even 4 years old by the time DX came out, and the frame rate had somehow only gotten worse. Some of the other issues with Sonic Adventure DX included the added incentive of unlocking the Sonic games for the Game Gear for beating each campaign. This was seen as a waste because the Sonic Game Gear games aren't very good to begin with. On top of unlocking more trash games, players were also given the option to take on side missions in the hub world. This was also seen as unwise because the hub world was widely considered to be the worst part of the original Sonic Adventure. On top of that, characters would just regularly go through walls or enemies, get caught on walls, or even break when they would just collide with environmental objects. And finally, probably the worst part of most 3D Sonic games, the camera. See, Sonic Adventure DX added a free camera mode, which was a manual camera that was complete garbage. It was difficult to handle due to the game's speed and would even freak out or just phase out of the map if it went left untouched for too long. This meant that the auto camera mode was the camera mode used by most players, save for when that mode bugged out or phased out of the map too. Yeah, it's safe to say the reception of Sonic Adventure DX was not what Sega was hoping for or expecting.
Oh no! Not again!
Some reviews even told owners of the original game that they were better off playing that one because DX didn't really bring anything new to the table. It was pretty much just a port that Sega tried to pass off as the director's cut by improving the graphics and adding some new content. The reception of DX was so bad that it actually had some fans questioning the quality of the original, since all of Sonic Adventure's flaws were on clear display with the port. This resulted in the polarizing reputation of Sonic Adventure to take a turn for the worse, and simply become another bomb of a Sonic game. So that pretty much sums up the first few significant Sonic the Hedgehog releases, And given the fact that a number of the issues present in those games still plague the series to this date, I could probably sum up my evidence here. But I won't. Remember when we discussed Sonic Blast being the worst game in the franchise? Well, what if I told you Sega managed to outdo themselves in that category? They would go on to create a game so bad that not only was it dubbed the worst Sonic game of all time, but one of the worst video games ever made. No video on bad 3D Sonic games would be complete without mention of Sonic the Hedgehog, commonly referred to as Sonic 06. Sonic 06 was meant to be a commemoration of 15 years of the Blue Blur. Development for the game began shortly after the 2005 release of Shadow the Hedgehog, meaning that Sega had a pretty low bar to raise. And then they drilled a hole 7,000 feet into the ground and dragged that bar down with them. This game would also be a reboot for the franchise, sparked by the question, what if Sonic existed in the real world? That concept, combined with taking a number of elements from Sonic Adventure, were supposed to lead the franchise down a familiar and hopefully successful path. Sega was so certain that Sonic 06 would be the return to form Sonic fans had been clamoring for years, that they even went and renamed it after the original game. This was supposed to be the game that would take Sonic down a new direction and hopefully reinstate him as a genuine competitor to Mario. And then Sega simply went too fast. The game was set to be released by holiday season 2006. This tight deadline meant that the Sonic team reportedly ignored a lot of their quality assurance team's reports of bugs and glitches. 2006 also just so happened to be the year that Yuji Naka resigned as the head of Sonic Team when he was the one tasked with producing this new game. On top of that, Sonic Team was also split in half, with one half working on Sonic 06 for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, and the other half working on the game for the Wii. But the Wii's weaker hardware meant that Sonic 06 wouldn't be able to run on it, so the decision to port the game onto the Wii was scrapped in favor of designing an entirely new game. That game would become Sonic and the Secret Rings, which is, oddly enough, one of the better 3D Sonic entries. So let's imagine you're Sega for a second. The producer of the game that's supposed to save your flagship bearer resigns. You cut your development team in half and task them with working on two completely different games. And the team working on the game that's going to save this franchise is ignoring their QA team's reports of bugs and glitches. What do? Do you delay the game's release date because you care about the reputation of your flag bearer, the die-hard fanbase of your biggest franchise, and the new direction that franchise is hopefully going to be taking? I think most logical people would say yes, but when fat Christmas bonus checks are on their way, most logical thinking probably goes out the window. Yeah, Sega puts out Sonic 06 on November 14th, 2006, right in time for the holidays. And I think most kids would have rather gotten coal, or even been beaten with it. Looking at it in hindsight, it's not difficult to tell that the game would be universally despised, especially when the development team ignored their QA team's reports throughout development. I mean, Sega should have known that, right? Or maybe they thought if they ignored all the criticism it would just go away and the money would come rolling in. But that's not what happened. The game is certainly ambitious in terms of story, and I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of what it's about, but just so you know, it's ridiculously complex. Right, so Princess Elise of Fakeland is kidnapped by Eggman, who wants to hone the destructive power within her body, and Sonic and friends are trying to save her. Also, everyone's favorite mass murderer, Shadow the Hedgehog, accidentally releases some evil spirit who transports him to a post-apocalyptic future, where we're introduced to Silver, a telekinetic hedgehog. Ooh. The evil spirit convinces Silver that the world is like this because of Sonic. So Silver travels back in time to kill Sonic and save his future. So with all that being said, yeah, the game is certainly ambitious in terms of story. But in terms of gameplay, it relies on the sins of Sonic games past, while somehow incorporating its own brand of awful. Oh boy, where to begin? Well, while the game does have Sonic's name in it, you play as side characters like Tails, Amy, Blaze, and Knuckles quite a bit during his portions of the game, and Tails is especially agonizing to play as given that he's really, slow, has strange controls, and boring combat sequences. It's not like playing as Sonic is really that much better though, given the fact that his controls are so sensitive that simply tapping the stick in another direction while you're moving can send him careening off a cliff. Also, some of his animations just randomly cause the camera to freak out for seemingly no reasons, and he sometimes launches off of platforms with his chin tucked into his chest, which can't be good for his neck, especially since it has to support a bowling ball with party hats taped to the back of it. While playing as Silver sounds cool in writing, cause, telekinesis, it doesn't translate well in gameplay. Trying to aim while playing as Silver is pretty much seen as meaningless, so make of that what you will, I guess. The cinematic cutscenes in the game look great, and that's one thing that most modern Sonic games really do have going for them, but the in-game environments look absolutely abysmal. It looks like the in-game environments were one of the things taken from Sonic Adventure, because they straight up look like Dreamcast graphics. Now keep in mind that Sonic 06 was released on the same consoles that supported games like Batman Arkham City, Battlefield 3, and Red Dead Redemption, so there's really no reason for it to look like a middle school diorama. Another big thing about the game is the fact that side missions are mandatory to progress through the main story. That wouldn't be so bad if they were at all entertaining or even felt important. They're literally just there to force some replay value down the player's throat and say, oh look, it's like an old Sonic game, now look at all the replay value. Examples of the thrilling side missions you can go on if you play this game include destroying enemies and picking up 3 collectibles along a linear path, walking through some portals to speak with a priest, and beating a man wearing a Sonic hat in a race. Huh. That guy sounds familiar. On top of the side missions bogging down the main story, each one also has its own set of loading screens. This one is a little difficult to explain, so I'm just going to go ahead and paint you a picture. Right, you approach an NPC who has a mission for you. You hit the prompt to talk to them only to be greeted by a loading screen. So they give you whatever BS mission they're going to assign you, and then that's followed by a second loading screen. So you complete whatever trash you're tasked with doing, which takes you to another loading screen. Finally, you get congratulated and maybe even rewarded with a job well done, and your final reward is your last loading screen. That's just for one side mission, keep in mind, and those are mandatory to progress through the story. I shouldn't have to say it, but I'm sure the fact that there are 4 loading screens for each side mission make the game feel broken. On top of that, the voice acting is extremely over the top, not like in Sonic Adventure where it's easy to make fun of and enjoy it. The voice actors seem like they're trying too hard, and it just comes off as really bad.
No, that's not possible. We're still in the doctor's base, but how can that be? Wait, there's no doubt now.
I have the power to travel through time.
No way!
Elise! Ah! This ship is about to crash. Too bad, Eggman.
Of course, the camera's an issue too, as are the perspective-based controls. I don't think I need to illustrate that too much, but yeah, the camera and its perspective-based controls result in Sonic just coming to a complete halt in the middle of going fast, a la Sonic Adventure or some unfair deaths, just like Sonic Blast. Finally, losing all of your lives means that you're booted back to the loading screen, just like the 1991 game. But the good news is that you don't have to enter a cheat code to get back to where you were. You simply have to access your save file. And I do mean your save file, because Sonic 06 has no autosave feature. Yeah, a Sonic game, released in 2006, has no autosave feature. All of what I just listed off ate up about 1.5 pages of this script, and the sad part is that it's not even everything wrong with Sonic 06. It shouldn't be too difficult to see why the game is not only universally abhorred, but the damage it did to the Sonic franchise, the character, and Sega. But, like with just about every other Sonic game, there are staunch defenders of Sonic 06. In fact, when this game came out, fans were bombarding review sites with 10 out of 10 or 5-star reviews, even going so far as to call it a masterpiece or the greatest game they've ever played. Now, I don't know whether these reviewers were trolling or not, but if they're real, it goes to show how betrayed the Sonic fandom truly is. And that's probably how they feel, too. Years after its release, some fans are writing reviews in defense of the game, with one review in particular citing the game's broken homing attacks as making for interesting speedrunning opportunities. To me, that just shows how badly Sonic fans wanted this game to be good, to be everything Sega promised it would be, for the first time since probably 1991. Sonic fans of all generations wanted to see that Sega put at least some effort into a Sonic game, but they didn't. And look, I get it. The game wasn't aided by its holiday deadline, its producer resigning, and its development team being split in half. A lot of this game's issues were out of the development team's control. But at that point, it's sort of Sega's job to step in and say, look, we care about our development team, we care about our fans, we care about the quality of this game. We're going to delay the deadline because we want it to be as good as possible for you, the fans. We want to deliver on our promise. But they didn't. They essentially sacrificed their flag bearer for holiday bonuses, and this game served as a template for the quality of pretty much every Sonic game following it. Sonic 06 damaged the Sonic the Hedgehog brand very badly. Potentially irreparably. So what is it that makes these games so terrible? Well, I think it's a number of issues that have plagued the series since Sonic Blast and were only exacerbated in Sonic Adventure. Unresponsive controls, awkward, wonky, and generally poor combat, and of course, god-awful writing. When Sonic was created in 1990, he was intended to be the cool kid that teenagers could relate to. He was a rebellious action hero that wanted justice, fought for a cause, and could back his arrogance up. And then they started letting him talk, and oh boy. Long gone were the days of the impatient hedgehog wondering when he was going to go fast again. The hedgehog who let his actions speak for him. Now, we're stuck with a hedgehog that's a joke of his former self. His witty remarks come off as dumb, really base-level humor, and I think that's how a lot of people see Sonic now. As an idiot. An idiot that hasn't been helped by his ever-expanding universe and the ridiculous situations he's continually put into. How is a storyline involving time travel and, spoiler alert, a kiss with an actual human supposed to restore Sonic to his former glory? How is the Werehog a fresh, cool reinvention when it abandoned everything Sonic was originally about? These overly complex storylines have only served to hurt him, and these gimmicks they keep forcing on him are killing everything the franchise is about. Don't forget that Sonic, at its core, is a series about going fast. And even that's been watered down since Sonic's introduction into the 3D world. A number of these 3D games have these high-octane, fast-paced moments reminiscent of the classic, but then they turn around and punish you for not pressing a button quickly enough. The unresponsive controls have definitely damaged the franchise's core elements. It also doesn't help that most of these modern games have a focus on platforming over speed. And yeah, I know Sonic is a high-speed 3D platformer, but games like Sonic Forces and Sonic Boom focus more on the platforming aspect of the franchise than the speed portion, and those games still suffer from the exact same problems that the rest of them do. I think the most disheartening thing about Sonic, though, is that it's essentially become a copy of the very franchise that threatened to put Sega under. Mario. Sonic didn't have a place in the world of 3D gaming, which would have killed the franchise, so Sega just kind of figured, hey, why not copy what that there Mario fella's doing over there? And yeah, they got Sonic Adventure out of it, but it didn't work in the long term because Sonic isn't Mario. He doesn't need ability-altering power-ups to run around and beat up baddies. All he needs is his speed. But when combat was introduced to the franchise, it started to strip Sonic of the very thing that made him unique, until the franchise was mostly focused on combat and platforming, with only small glimmers of the thing that made him unique, his speed. This trend unfortunately continued until Sonic was no different than, say, Mega Man, Duke Nukem, or Rayman, except that he was pretty quick. As a result, Sonic doesn't have an easily identifiable 3D game. There is no early Sonic game that's seen as critical or important to the franchise or the genre. They were too busy copying what everybody else was doing instead of trying to pioneer something cool and unique of their own. Sonic simply doesn't have his Super Mario 64. Sega succeeded in making Sonic synonymous with them, but they failed to make a title that became synonymous with Sonic. Except for, I guess, Sonic 06, but that's for all the wrong reasons. Even the 1991 game isn't really synonymous with Sonic anymore, because it's been buried beneath the rubble of all of the failed Sonic projects following it. And anybody that digs through that rubble might not like what they find. One nostalgic reviewer did that, and he had this to say of the 1991 game. There are problems that lie with creating a game wherein its primary mechanic is simply being really, really fast. Going really fast in this instance meant simply holding the right directional button and letting the game zip your character across the level without any input on your behalf. And anything breaking that flow grinds the game down to a halt, defeating its entire purpose. Sounds like a common gripe amongst most of the speed portions of the 3D Sonic games, right? So my question to you is, should have Sonic the Hedgehog been a one-and-done game? Obviously there's no way that could have happened given the game's massive success and its importance to Sega in the console wars. But imagine if there was only one Sonic the Hedgehog game. Do you think history would have been kind to it, or would we still view it in the same way we do today? Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever know, because Sega's too busy digging the hole deeper and deeper beyond what's already out there. It's sort of telling that the franchise has been a bust since 1998, when the only games that earn really any sort of praise are the ones that harken back to the glory days of Sonic the Hedgehog. The old days when Sega had their backs up against the wall and were fighting for survival. The games that focus mostly on speed and really lack any sort of combat, like the daytime portions of Sonic Unleashed. But even then, in a take-it-or-leave-it situation, I think most fans would simply leave that behind. Hell, even the 3D games that are widely praised are still laden with issues that are present throughout the rest of the series. Unresponsive controls, lack of player involvement, meaningless combat, and poor camera implementation. I think that everything wrong with Sonic the Hedgehog can be summed up as Sega searching for his identity still. They've copied what everybody else was doing for so long that they forgot who Sonic was and they don't know who they want him to be. As a result of that, they're trying so many new ideas and gimmicks, but not fleshing them out and immediately pulling it all back at the first sign of criticism. To me, Sega is still trying to make a game that Sonic can become synonymous with. They're trying to make something unique and cool when in reality they're making tons of games that are just like everything else around them. It honestly seems like Sega doesn't even know what they want Sonic the Hedgehog to be anymore. Right, so I gotta be honest here. In its current state, I do not know what, if anything, can be done to fix Sonic the Hedgehog. Given the franchise's track record over the past 20 years, I think a hard reboot is really the only answer. Give Sonic Team some time off, maybe let them take a nice little vacation or work on some passion projects that are not Sonic related, and maybe, just maybe, in 10 or 20 years we can reopen that Pandora's box, take a look at what was working, take a look at what wasn't, and build a foundation based on what was working, because they're trying like 4 different things at once right now, and none of them are working together or separately. Personally, I don't think Sega can fix any of the damage that's been done to Sonic at this point. A vacation, followed by a hard reboot with a brand new foundation and new mechanics that separate Sonic from Mario as much as possible, is really the best and probably the only route if they ever hope to restore Sonic to his former glory. I will say this, it'll be difficult, but it's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible. The only reason I say a hard reboot is necessary is because it seems like Sega's grabbing at straws at this point. And as a kind journalist states, they have been since 1998. The reality seems to be that Sega have no idea what to do with the brand, and have never known where they were going with it since it entered the 3D realm. The nature of fast-paced platforming is not something that translates well in the realm of 3D, and Sega and Sonic Team certainly have not been making it any easier.
Okay, you be careful, Tails.
Leave it to me.
I want to wrap this video up with one last quote that I think perfectly summarizes Sonic's place in the world of gaming now, and makes it easy to understand and maybe even sympathize with how Sonic fans currently feel. Sonic's long, slow, sad decline is akin to a great athlete that just doesn't know when to retire. It's hard to remember how great he once was when so much time has passed, and I have a hard time imagining what could be done to make the Sonic name relevant again. Unlike Mario, Sonic is a product of his time, a quintessentially 90s personality that just hasn't been able to figure out his place in the modern world. I don't think he ever will. Maybe once enough time has passed and we've all grieved for him, we can consider the notion of a reboot. So, will the next Sonic game address any of these problems? Probably not. Does Sonic need a serious reinvention? Absolutely. Will Sonic ever get the cure to what ails him? Never say never. But what do you think Sonic needs to cure what ails him? Feel free to let me know down in the comments below or on Twitter at Cap'n_Anthony. Please, let's try to keep it civil. I know Sonic is a touchy subject for most people, but well, he's a burning train that flew right off the rails into an orphanage that exploded. Thank you so much for giving me your time in this video, and I will catch you in the next one. But you won't be able to catch me because I'm too fast.
Whoa, this guy is faster than Sonic!